And welcome back to the Interfaith Roundtable. I'm Cantor Mark Perman. Rabbi means teacher, whereas in some faiths clergy is considered anointed or closer to God. In the Jewish tradition, everyone has the ability to be close to the divine, and it is the rabbi who helps facilitate that connection through study, through teaching of the Jewish tradition, through prayer, and through the transmission of his or her soul to the congregation. Rabbi Howard Herman was born in Bridgeport. He was ordained at Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion in New York in 1978. Prior to his ordination, he studied extensively in Israel, and in 1980 he accepted the position at FVJC Emek Shalom as their rabbi, where I have the honor to be the chazan or cantor. He has been there going on 33 years. Rabbi Herman is a chaplain at the US VA Medical Centers in Newington and West Haven, Connecticut. He is an adjunct professor in the Connecticut Community College system, and he can be heard every Sunday morning on WTIC AM 1080, giving insightful talks and words of wisdom. And you have to know that his favorite baseball team is the Boston Red Sox. No, just kidding. Just kidding. Don't get mad. The New York Yankees. Welcome, Rabbi Herman. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to have you here.
Good to be here.
Well, in today's world, with people jumping around from job to job, career to career, you have managed what I guess they call job stability, being in the same position for going on 34 years, working with Jewish people, non-Jewish people, different personalities over the years. How have you managed to have that consistency and be where you've been for so long?
Well, I think it's a matter of loving what you do, and understanding the nature of the job, understanding the nature of what it means to be a rabbi, and working with people, and working with a community, working with individuals. And I think on many levels you have to compartmentalize that to understand what you're doing at any given time. And you try to not overdo what your strengths are. And I think that's probably been the basis of any success that I've had. I know my limits, I know my strengths, and I try to stay within that framework.
Have you ever felt the need to kind of stretch beyond those limits and say, I mean, basically, how do you keep it fresh for 33 years? I mean, think about actors who do long-running shows, and sometimes they start joking around after 300 or 400 shows. I mean, how do you keep it fresh and new and exciting and not boring?
People ask me that a lot when it comes to writing sermons or writing talks or my radio show on WTIC. And I don't know, number one, I never really think about it that way as far as it being fresh. There are literally millions and millions and millions of topics and ideas to think about and to speak about. And when something hits me, I'll put it down on a piece of paper just as an idea. I have reams of paper full of ideas of things that I've never spoken about, that I've never talked about, that I've never delved into. So I could probably safely say that I'll be able to use new material for a long time to come.
Now, in today's world, there's this conflict about whether the rabbi or the minister or the priest should get too political or too controversial. Some think that is the role of the clergy. Others say, nope, stay out of politics, stay out of controversy, just make us feel good. In my opinion, you manage somehow to straddle both worlds. You can do both. So do you try to do both, and when do you pull back from that?
I think it's important to do both. I think that your congregants, live both in the world of politics and in the world of religion. And I think to avoid that area would be unfortunate. I think it would be dishonest that if you didn't try to allude to some of your own personal ideas. When I get up and speak, I never get up and speak with the idea that people are going to agree with me. That's not why I speak. I speak to teach people something. The greatest compliment that anyone can pay me is, Rabbi, after services, I learned something today. That by far is the greatest compliment that anyone can ever give me. And, if people don't agree with me in terms of my views, that's fine. At least it provoked them to think a little bit. If it made them angry or if it made them upset, that's an emotion that's certainly acceptable, and that's okay, and we can talk about that.
In a synagogue I worked in years ago, I won't say the name, people got very upset on the high holidays when the rabbi spoke out against the Iraq war and felt that was not his place. Of course, there were those who were supporters of it. And they tried to really shut him down over it. Have you ever felt that pressure of people going, hey, you know, we don't like that, you better stop that?
No,
You know?
no, because I mean, I found at the Farmington Valley Jewish congregation that it's a completely open pulpit, that views are welcome. They're not necessarily going to be views that are shared by everyone. But I do think that a rabbi or any speaker has the responsibility, though, of sharing both sides, you know, of not just coming down on one side and saying, this is the only side that exists, to be eloquent enough and to be open enough to acknowledge that there is another position. I mean, it may not be your position, it may be a minority position, or maybe it's a majority position, but to understand that there's another position out there, and people have a right to choose what side they want to come down on. But I never go out there with the idea that people are going to agree with me. That's not why I speak.
This is the Interfaith Roundtable. I'm Cantor Mark Perman. My guest is Rabbi Howard Herman of the Farmington Valley Jewish Congregation, Emek, Shalom. If you have any questions, obviously you can't do that live because we're not live. This will be airing in May. We are live now, but not to you. So if you have any questions, you can email them to me at mjperman9@gmail.com, mjperman9@gmail.com, and you'd be okay with that if somebody has a question and I read it on the next show and
Sure.
say forever and get
Sure.
it to you and so forth.
Sure.
What many folks probably don't realize is that within Judaism we have many different denominations. I guess within the Christian world there's many denominations, and within the Jewish world there's an old joke of 2 Jews, 3 opinions. I guess can you tell folks a little bit about the different denominations that exist and why you chose to be a Reform rabbi?
Sure. Well, I mean, Judaism is dominated by 4 different groups: Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, and Reconstructionist. I mean, there are other groups there are secular Jews, there are Sephardic Jews, but the dominant groups in America are Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, and Reconstructionist. Orthodox Jews are the most traditional group. They are the group that read the Bible or read the Torah literally. They take the Torah word for word as it's written and try to practice and follow it, again, as it's written today, as it was written back then. Reform Judaism is probably the most liberal of the 4 groups. They are completely interpretive of what's written in the Bible. In other words, Reform Judaism has the idea that what was written down at a given time does not mean that it has to be followed exactly as it was written at that time. We need to try to interpret what it means to us today. In other words, how can we fulfill what the Torah is telling us in a modern context, in a modern ideology? Conservative Judaism is actually the only real American brand of Judaism that grew up here. It grew up because there were Orthodox Jews here, and then Reform Jews fled some of the trials and tribulations that they went through in Europe. And when they got here, they made a home, not in New York, but out in Cincinnati. And then when Eastern European Jews were fleeing the pogroms of Europe, they came to the United States, and they saw Orthodox Jews. They were running away from Orthodoxy. They were afraid to become Orthodox Jews because of the persecution. Reform Judaism, liberal Judaism was so foreign to them that it seemed like they couldn't practice their Judaism by being Reform Jews, so they sort of formulated a middle line between the two. They called that Conservative Judaism, and it grew up in terms of the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York and the United Synagogue of America. And then there's Reconstructionist Judaism, which was sort of the brainchild of who was a conservative rabbi at one time, Mordechai Kaplan, who decided that Judaism was not only to be looked on as a faith, but was to be looked on as a civilization, as an evolving civilization. And as that civilization evolved, we needed to reconstruct certain aspects of Judaism to fit into the changing civilization. And one of those things was the prayer book that needed to be reconstructed. The service needed to be reconstructed. Some of the prayers needed to be reconstructed. Thus, Reconstructionist Judaism.
Now, one would think with the advent of, emancipation or freedom for Jews, that of course people would say, we're free, we can practice our tradition, and Judaism would be flourishing. But yet studies have shown, experience has shown that there's been the opposite effect, that the freer we are, the more assimilated people become, and the less they seem to gravitate towards their tradition. It's almost like Judaism did better in the shtetl and has done worse generally under such freedom. Why is that phenomenon? Do you see that phenomenon in the Christian world? Not really, do you?
Well, I think religion, at least in America, waxes and wanes. I think there are periods of time when religion is more paramount in people's lives, and at other times when it's less important. So I don't necessarily see that as an outgrowth or a result of assimilation. I think assimilation in some respects, for the Reform movement, assimilation gave birth to the Reform movement because they didn't want to be Orthodox. They wanted to try to sort of move off in another direction, to live life the way society lives, sort of to have their feet in two different worlds, in the Jewish world and in the secular world. So I don't necessarily see assimilation as a bad thing. I think when assimilation becomes bad or negative for religion is when you completely give up on the ideology that is the foundation of religion, when you completely ignore that ideology, when you don't find anything within specifically Jewish tradition to grab onto that gives you a foothold or that gives you an anchor. I think that's when assimilation becomes a negative for religion.
Now, you didn't mention another group that's more controversial in the Jewish world, and it's called the Messianic Jews, or those who accept Jesus. And many people over the years have asked, why don't Jews accept Jesus? One rabbi I talked to in Atlanta at one point said, well, we don't even believe Jesus existed. That was the Orthodox point of view. I think most of us would disagree with that, but have a different interpretation of who he was. But yet he was Jewish. So explain the phenomenon then of Christianity and anti-Semitism when the main progenitor of Christianity is Jewish. It's too much. It's a rolling question.
It's a huge question.
Cut it down. Why don't Jews accept Jesus? Why don't mainstream Jews accept the divinity of Jesus? How's that?
Because mainstream Jews or Judaism believes in monotheism and does not accept anthropomorphism, where you have a man-like or a human-like figure that represents the deity. For Jews, God is God, Adonai Echad, God is one. Not three aspects of one thing or one entity, but just one. And to say that Jesus lived, to say that Jesus would be God would be for Jews to say, well, God existed in spiritual form at one time and then in human form much later on. And that's an anathema to Judaism and Jewish belief, that there is no humanity to the nature of God.
So we Jews have our prophets, and we read from the prophets every week. Some have said, well, Jesus was a form of prophet. Are there some Jews who can accept that as Jesus as a prophet and still be considered Jews, or once you go to that level, you've already transcended?
Well, I think if you understand the nature of prophecy, where prophets are chosen by God, prophets didn't have a choice. They became prophets because God wanted them to be prophets.
But what's to stop anybody from saying, God chose me on the prophet? How did we know that they were credible?
Well, because most of the prophets didn't want to do it. They didn't want to be prophets. They didn't do it willingly. They did it because they had to do it. It was what God expected of them. It was God who puts the words of the prophets in the prophet's mouth. And most of the prophets were disdained. No one would choose that position. No one would choose the position that the prophets were put in. They were put in that position by virtue of their strength as to who they were, by their strength of personality, by the courage of their convictions. I mean, that's why God chose them to be prophets. So I don't think that, there were people who were self-proclaimed prophets. There were people who in
false
Judaism
prophets.
were false prophets. They were false messiahs, who were self-proclaimed. And each one was proven to be, a charlatan.
Tell everybody then a little bit about the Jewish concept of Messiah, because again, there's disagreement. Right in the Orthodox world, when the Messiah comes, I think we're all supposed to gather in Israel and rebuild the temple and sacrifice animals. Then there's different levels of what Messianism means. So how do you view the concept of Messiah?
Well, I'm more prone myself to thinking that the Messiah is more a time period than it is an actual person. Even though, Orthodox Judaism expects the Messiah to come in the form of a person, and they still have the Golden Gate bricked in Jerusalem, where the only one who will come through the Golden Gate into Jerusalem will be the Messiah. I'm dubious that there'll be one person who will be the savior of all humanity. I think, if we are considered partners with God, if we work in partnership with God, then we all ultimately save religion, or we all ultimately save ourselves in partnership with God. And I think when we do that right, when it happens together, when it happens with everybody sort of being on the same page at the same time, I think that will usher in a time period, a Messianic era, or a Messianic time period where every single person will understand that God is God, where the Jewish prayer book says, where every knee will bend, where every tongue will swear loyalty to God of everybody. So I don't see that we're waiting for a person per se. I think we're more likely waiting for a time period. And I think the mistake that we make is that we're waiting. We're waiting. That I think to bring the Messiah has to be an active process, not a passive process. And I think just the notion of waiting says the Messiah is not coming.
Well, Rabbi Robert Levine of Road of Shalom in New York wrote a book called "There's No Messiah and You're It."
It's like the story of Lamed Vav, the story of the 36 righteous souls who exist in any generation. No one knows who they are, but the world exists because of these 36 righteous souls. And the idea behind it is that maybe it's you, maybe it's me, maybe it's our bar mitzvah the coming week. It could be anybody. Anybody could take on that position of leadership. Anybody could take on that position of teacher. It doesn't have to be, the most glorified rabbi in the generation. It could
What's
be
popular out there now is, I hear it a lot, religion is just a source of division. John Lennon wrote about this in Imagine when he said, and no religion too, seeing it as a source of division and conflict and war. Then others say, I'm disputing it, but, I don't believe in organized religion, but I am spiritual. How do you try to counteract that? Do you accept that? Or do you think that's valid?
I don't subscribe to the idea that religion brings about conflict. No, I don't think religion brings about conflict. I think people bring about conflict who are so zealous in their drive to practice or push that particular religion that they not allow anybody else to have another idea about who God is, about what religion is, about what place religion plays in their lives. So I don't think it's religion. I think it could be on any subject that would cause division among people. I think that religion is a convenient scapegoat because it's so popular, it's so easy to point to. But I don't think it's religion per se, because if you look at the tenets of religion, if you look at the tenets, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, if you look at those tenets, they don't talk about being divided. They don't talk about division.
Yeah.
Not at all. Not at all. So I think it's the zealousness on the part of people that foment the division and bring about the wars, and I think that's where it comes from.
I had a little Facebook debate with someone who was saying that, this is why Islam is a violent religion. Look at the Quran. It says this, 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 this. And I said, well, if you look at the Torah and look at it fundamentally, there's a lot there about stoning the adulterous woman. There's stoning the child who is causing problems. There's go in and take the country back from them and kill all your enemies. I mean, it's one reason Yigal Amir justified assassinating Rabin, was that if somebody gives away territory that's yours, you have a biblical right to kill them.
And that's one of the reasons why in Reform Judaism we don't take words literally. We don't take the concepts, the ideas literally, because they were written at a given time period, under given circumstances, by certain people, and to say that those ideas are valid as they're written for all time period to come, I think ignores what the Torah is supposed to do. The Torah is supposed to teach us, or the Bible or the Quran is supposed to teach us in every generation that there are certain ways to live. There are certain things that we accept as important, that we embrace certain ideologies. And I think if you don't constantly talk about them, if you don't constantly update them in terms of what's happening now, then you're not making religion relevant to the people who are living now.
Do you look at our secular world and get concerned that it's in some ways moving away from religious traditional values, and the ones who seem to be speaking up for those values, the most vocally, at least covered by the media, are more the right-wing voices, saying this is what we must do, we must legislate morality, but I don't hear the progressive voices, at least in the media, saying, well, wait a minute, we can weave religion back.
But they say that you must legislate morality the way we see morality. You have to legislate morality the way we envision it to be. And they're the ones that are speaking up, sure. But I mean, I think that the reform movement speaks up a lot. I mean, if you go to websites like the Religious Action Center in Washington, D.C., talking about social justice and talking about ethics and talking about values and talking about the morality of religion. I mean, I think those are the things that touch people where they live,
but why does
not so much the ritual.
But why does the media always go to more of the fundamentalist TV evangelists, people, the Oral Roberts, the Jerry Falwell when he was alive, and Moral Majority? I mean, why don't we hear from the Reform Jews, Rabbi?
Because they make good copy.
Yeah.
They make really good copy. And I have this radio show, and
tell people about it.
Not to push the radio show,
push it.
But I think the greatness of the radio show that I hear from people is that it relates to all religions. That it doesn't just relate to Jews. That all people can gain a sense of something from listening to some of these broadcasts. And again, it's not so much that I'm a great speaker, but people are hungry for something spiritual that they can utilize today. Not that they have to think about in terms of sacrificial cult, in terms of the priesthood, in terms of something that took place in the past. But how can they utilize that thing today? How can they enrich their lives today? How can they use spiritual values to make their lives better now?
What are some of the things you speak about? I mean, it's on so early, and I've said, please put it on the website, because I can't I probably could get up there early. But anyway, tell folks a little bit, a synopsis of some of your topics.
We speak about lots of different topics. We talk about relationships, all kinds of relationships, parent-child relationships. We talk about spousal relationships, talk about human-God relationships.
So it's not just Jewish, it's for everybody.
It's for everybody.
Okay.
I think it relates to everyone. You were asking before about the spiritual. I think the whole idea behind spirituality is making a connection. It's making a connection between you and a higher power, between you and God. And that connection is made in multiple ways. It doesn't have to be through prayer. I tell people all the time that volunteerism You know, going out and volunteering, doing something in your community, doing something in your church, doing something in your synagogue, doing something for the United Way. You know, when you connect with other people, that's helping to make the world a better place.
Tell people a little bit about the secular humanist Jews. I'm not even sure I get it, but they basically feel they can be culturally Jewish and intellectually Jewish, but they don't believe or accept the divinity part of it. Can you be Jewish and reject that part of Judaism?
Yes, I think you can. I think you can. I mean, do I think God goes away? No, I don't think God goes away. I think people simply don't embrace the idea or ideology of a God in the world. Do I think you can be a good person, a good human being, without God? Can you be ethical? Yeah, of course you can, without question.
What is God to you, if you have to just, put you on the spot? Well, what is your experience? What is your sense of it? How do you envision it?
God is a power or a strength within me that enables me to cope with anything that I come into contact with, that I'm able to, it gives me strength that I know that I can persevere in any situation because I guess for me, I look at God as being a partner, that I'm never alone.
So the covenant lives for you. It's not just an idea, it's
right,
a reality.
It's a reality. Yeah,
there's
an active partnership that goes on in life, and I thank God for that partnership every day. I say certain prayers. Do I say 100 blessings as we're supposed to do every day? No, but I do thank God for the covenant. I do thank God for the relationship that God and I have each and every day.
Well, for those who would like to come sometimes, we have services every Friday night. Sal, do a little plug for us, since I'm the cantor there. 7:30, Farmington Valley Jewish Congregation in Simsbury. Once a month, second Friday of the month, services at 6:30. We thank you so much for joining us, Rabbi, and hope you'll be part of the Roundtable. I want to thank Althea, I want to thank Karen, Phyllis, and sir, I'm going to ask your name again on the air. Clay, I'm sorry. And Sally, who had to leave. If anybody has any questions, once again, they can filter it through me, and I'll filter it through you.
Sure.
At mjperman9@gmail.com, mjperman9@gmail.com. Thank you so much for joining us once again on the Interfaith Roundtable, and see you next time.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.